Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I'm Good morning. Just for all of you guys that are listening here on this recording, I'm Kelly Vaughn, interim dean for the School of Education, and we're continuing in our series on social emotional learning Saturdays. And this month we have two wonderful guests with us, Dr. Susan Charles, who's on our faculty, and the director for our master's degree programs, uh, at least two of them in education, and
Yeah.
Dr. Anabel Jensen, who is a former wonderful colleague of mine, is professor emerita at
Mhm.
NDNU, and is also the founder of 6 Seconds. I always want to say 6seconds.org, but 6 Seconds is the name of the organization. She also used to be one of the founders for Synapse School.
Yes.
So all these wonderful initiatives that she has cultivated, and both of them collectively are going to talk about optimism. Are you an optimist? And that probably has a very interesting driving force in both of their endeavors. So, curious question that I'm going to shoot out to you guys. The title, Optimism, and Are You an Optimist? Can you share more about that and what led you to um, to have this topic?
Well, one thing you might do, Kelly, or all the people that are listening, is to ask yourself a question. How many adversities have you dealt with this morning? Because research says that on the average, an individual deals with 17 adversities on a daily basis, 17. So you can tell whether or not you're an optimist or a pessimist, depending on your answer. If somebody says to you, "Oh, I've already had 30 this morning before I had my coffee," I think that's probably going to be someone with a bit of a pessimistic attitude. But on the other hand, if they say, "Oh my gosh, maybe three or four things have happened this morning that felt a little adverse," then that person's probably an optimist. So there's one mechanism for figuring it out.
Hmm. Susan, did you want to add to that?
No, no, let's keep going. Yeah. I
Okay, all right.
always like Annabelle's. We will continue in about optimism and pessimism. Yeah.
Okay, so what I know you each shared some really moving content slides, and if you would like me to, point to them as reference points to share more about this topic, I'm happy to do so. So would you like me to start with you, Annabelle, or Susan? And I can toggle
Yeah.
between both of you.
Well, a little bit about, I will just say that, just to add to what Annabelle said about optimism and pessimism, I always say the whole idea of a positive psychology. Too often we look at life as black or white. And my thing, I say to people, it's in everybody's life. There are up days and down days. Nobody is immune. And I think, when we begin to make sense of our lives and we say, my life matter. So this is what today we want to talk about. Yeah. My
Mhm.
life matter. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Kelly, I'd be happy to jump in and start with you asked a minute ago about, how did our journey begin? And so I'd be happy to start. So if you want to go to my slide deck, and I think the
Sure.
first thing that you're going to end up seeing is a joke. So this is a joke about, is this the definition of optimism? And so I want to say that it is not the definition of optimism, because optimism is really a specific set of skills, a specific set of skills. There's an interesting piece of research out there that probably optimism is determined by 25% in terms of our genetics, and the rest of it has to do with learning, has to do with content, has to do with our friends, has to do with, the adversities that end up being in our life. But my journey began with my son. So if you'll show the next picture, this is my son. So this is Caleb. He was a year old at this particular point in time. And we had just been to his physician for his year-old evaluation. And the doctor said to me, "Oh my gosh, Anabel, his legs are too straight." And I said, "What do you mean his legs are too straight?" It seems to me that legs are supposed to be straight. He said, "Oh no, legs are supposed to look like John Wayne's. They're supposed to be like this, with curves in them. And so I'm sending you off to an orthopedist." So off we went to the orthopedist, and the orthopedist said, "Oh yes, your physician is absolutely right. His legs are too straight." So here is the solution, Anabel. You need to put him into this particular guard. And so it's a metal bar. It's about 2.5 feet long. It's spread apart like this. And on the end of each of the metal bar, which was about 1.5 inches long and 1.5 inches wide, and as I said, 2.5 feet long, there were old-fashioned leather shoes. I don't even think we see these shoes anymore.
No.
You know the kind where you lace them all up and then you tie them on tight. So he had to wear this wet metal bar to sleep every single solitary night. And I looked at this contraption and I said to the doctor, "You've got to be kidding. He's just learning to walk and he's all over the place." And so I said, "We'll try." And he said, "No, don't try. Do this. Do this." So off we went, Caleb and I, home. And that night I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, this is just such a disaster." He was not at all a happy camper about having these on his feet. And I began to say to him things like, "Oh, Caleb, this is not forever. You won't have to be wearing these when you go off to college. It'll be okay. We'll be able to manage this. Caleb, isn't it a good thing you don't have night gloves on too at the very same time? And so, and isn't it a good thing that we're going to work on this and we're going to do exactly what the doctor said and we're going to do it every night?" Well, fortunately, because we did do it every single solitary night, we were able to cut it off. And so we only had to do this for 6 months instead of for a whole 9 months. Hooray, hooray, hooray. What I didn't realize is that I was actually talking to my son about the skills of optimism. And if you show the next slide, you'll see what I'm referring to. So here it is. So Marty Seligman, who's the father of positive psychology, and Susan, I know you know who this individual is the guru of optimism. And he talks about the fact that we have to look at adversity, what Caleb was dealing with, as temporary. It's not going to last forever. We have to look at it as it's just one part of our body, only our feet. He wasn't in a total potty cap. And the most important part of all probably is effort. So we have TIE, and these are the skills that I think are absolutely critical for teaching emotional intelligence. And so I began to do some research about emotional intelligence, and that's when I discovered Marty Seligman and began to practice these 3 skills myself.
Questions, folks? Talk back.
Sorry
Because
about that. Go ahead, Susan.
could you put up my first slide? And because I want to
Sure.
add it with to support what Anabel is saying. Because Anabel, I did finding purpose, and the first one, there's not that one, yeah.
This one?
No, the other one. The first
This
slide
one here.
saying, yeah. In life, what is it? You young people do best when they're challenged to strive, to achieve, and to serve. At 6 seconds, we talk about our noble goal. What is this thing that is bigger than us? For why are we doing this? And Caleb, for what purpose did he have to wear this thing on his foot? Why? What do I hope to accomplish with all my efforts, with all the striving that I am expected to do? And I tell this to teachers and parents, especially when we're dealing with young people, we have to tell them why. And this is what Anabel did with Caleb. And this is why I asked her to use that slide this morning. What are the higher goals that give this effort's meaning? What is the meaning behind all of this? This poor little boy having to wear this every night to go to bed. Why? What will happen in the end? What matters to me and why should it matter? And he was a little boy, but his mother was telling him he was a baby. And what is my ultimate concern in life? Thank you. So in 6 seconds, we talk about our noble goal. And Anabel, can we share our noble goals?
I hope you'll share yours. I'll be delighted to share mine.
Yeah. And always at 6 seconds in our training, what is the goal that is bigger than us? And my noble goal in life is to ensure in any way that I can, anything I can do to make sure that children are taken care of. It's all about the children. They are the future. And this is why I teach. This is why I continue to work with teachers and administrators and parents. My noble goal is about the children. So everything I do is about them, not only about my children and my grandchildren, but all children. This is why I'm in India, in China, in Africa. It's all children all over the world. That's my noble goal.
So, Kelly, if you'll go to my very last slide, you can
Very
see
well.
me with a set of wings on. It's at the very, very bottom. It's the very last slide.
Okay, if hopefully it will come up. Here we go.
I think it's right here, maybe. It was right after the blank slide. Nope, one back, sorry. So this is me. So I don't know that you can necessarily see this, but we had an interesting art project at the school that I founded, Synapse. It was run by our art teacher who did an amazing job. She had each one of the children, Susan was on the board at this particular time. And she had them identify a noble goal. So some of the kids' noble goal was to save the frogs. Did you know that some frogs are on the engendered list? Some kids had picked the goal of ecology because that's such an issue in terms of now and today. Some kids picked honesty because that was so important. But on those wings that have been created for me, there are children's faces. I had selected all of the children at Synapse and created my wings. I had to create 2 sets so I could get all of the children's faces on there. My noble goal is this: to balance accountability and compassion, or you might even say justice and mercy, so that integrity will flood the earth. And my second noble goal, because I think as I started 6 seconds, I'm entitled to have 2, is to help everybody else establish their noble goal. So I really think it's important that we know what we're here for and what we want to accomplish and what we want to get done. So I created 6 seconds and I said I wanted to have 1 billion. Can you imagine? Talk about a humongous goal. I wanted to have 1 billion members by the time I'm 100. So I've got 15 years left, folks. So I hope you'll all join me in this journey as we struggle to build a better world and to solve the problems that we have in front of us.
Thank you. And I will add to what Anabel says. A long-term goal takes time. It's not something that you do in a minute. It is meaningful to the person and has to be connected to others. It is not all about myself. It is something beyond myself. And two, especially in the world we live, everybody is I. So that is the point of a long-term goal, which Anabel said. It's beyond us. Yeah.
And frequently we can't do it by ourselves, you know.
Impossible to do it by ourselves.
We really need help. So there's another reason for practicing optimism.
Yeah.
I would share with you that I was so glad that I had taught Caleb those skills of optimism. And if Kelly, you would back up again and go back up to the beginning of the slide, that you will see the second slide is the picture of Caleb when he's slightly older. And here he is, a 6th grader. And you can see he's not a very happy camper at this particular point in time. And he's not a very happy camper because we're dealing with a major crisis in our life. His father has gotten addicted to cocaine. in addition to that, his father has left me with a debt of about $250,000, $250,000 that he had spent on drugs. And on top of that, he had developed AIDS. So here were Caleb and I dealing with a set of problems. And once more, I began to say to my son, Caleb, it is a temporary issue. Yes, we've got all this pain and angst, but you know what? Time will help us to deal with it. And one of the things that will help us to deal with it is to make sure that we continue to fight. So this is about that effort, about getting up every day and moving forward. We can pretend that a Mack truck has run over us and just, or we can get up and face life. So I said, let's look at it from the same point of view that we did when we were looking at your feet and when you were having to wear that awful metal bar. And let's face this issue in the same sort of way. Let's say that it's temporary and we'll get better. Let's say that it's isolated, because while this is your father and certainly an important person in your life, you still have grandparents, you still have aunts and uncles, you still have friends, you still have your soccer team, you still have your school friends. And it was so important to think about all of the pluses in our lives and not just the negatives. I would confess to you that one of the most terrible moments of my life was sitting on my front porch with the envelope in my hand. And this envelope was a answer to whether or not I had AIDS. So I had been tested 2 weeks before, and it took a long time at this particular point in time to figure out what your answer was. And I had a terrible time, folks, convincing myself to open the envelope, because I was very much afeared that I would say that I had HIV, and I was very lucky that I did not. So when we look at life, it is very important to practice these skills of optimism because they give us hope. They give us hope. I have so many different stories and I'd be happy to share them all, but I also do not want to be taking up all of the time and the space.
And
Mm.
as Anabel and I prepared, I said we decided I wanted Anabel to share this because I knew this if she wanted to. Because often we look at each other and we say, look at this woman started 6 seconds, she started this, she started that, and think she's lucky and I am unlucky. And everybody, and I say this to my own children and everybody I work with, we all have in our lives areas when we were down. And having a purpose in life requires commitment. One of my all-time favorite books is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And he wrote this book when he was in prison in Germany, waiting to be killed. And he said, even at that time, we can find meaning in our life. So again, Anabel talked about integrity, and we have to be able to hold ourselves together. Especially now, we sell happiness. People think you can buy happiness. Only you can make you happy. Could you share my second slide, please?
Sure, Susan. So those of you that just came in, I know there's several people that came in. I just wanted to recap that we have here our wonderful guest speakers, Dr. Anabel Jensen and Dr. Susan Charles, that are talking about optimism. So go ahead, Susan. Is this one? Youth
Yeah.
as a time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Youth is a time of idealism. And we all were there when we were young and we had hope and we were idealists. And I always ask, how can I manage to find something that is both rewarding and meaningful? Especially when we're dealing with young people, we tell them, making money, doing all of this thing, what is rewarding to you and what is meaningful? How can I pursue my dreams and avoid selling out? Especially now, we see people selling out without diminishing my chances to provide myself and the family I would like to have. How can I earn a living as a valued member of society and make a positive difference in the world? These are questions that sooner or later all young people must confront in order to make their most crucial life choices. And I used these questions with my children when they were growing up. What do you want to do that is meaningful and is going to make a difference in the world? Thank you.
Mm,
So some of you
okay.
might be interested in what happened with Caleb. So if you go back to my slide deck, we can take a look at him as he's all grown up. That would be the next picture after this one. So here he is. So I would share with you this particular story, which was very meaningful for me as a mother. It was at the holiday time. We were celebrating Christmas with my parents, and we had gone to Idaho. We were downstairs in the family room. The Christmas tree is there. It's after Christmas. And I said to Caleb, so Caleb, what is the very best Christmas present that you've ever gotten? And he looked at me and he sort of chuckled and he said, I can't believe you're asking that question. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, was it, the Nike shoes that I saved up 6 months for so I could afford to buy them? Was it the bicycle? Was it the Star Wars ship? Well, what was it that was so critically important to him? And he said, I really think, Aunt Mom, that I have to talk about two things. He said, one, it was so important about your unconditional love. And he said, but in some ways that's not nearly as important because he said, I think all mothers love their children. Well, I don't know if all mothers love their children, but anyway, I did love Caleb and I still do love Caleb. And he said, but I think this one was even more important. And he said, you taught me the skills of optimism.
Mm,
And he said that helped me to deal with struggles in college. When I would fail a test, I would say to myself, you know what, this is not the end of the world. And I just need to study harder. I need to find a study buddy. I need to do da-dum. Or when something would come along in which he was preparing for that he was really worried about, he would remember the importance of effort and put that into what was going on and happening. So he said, the most grateful gift the gift that I am the most grateful for is the gift of optimism. And he said, I hope that someday I will be passing that on to my children. But certainly if not, I will be passing it on to my coworkers and to my bosses and to my friends. And he certainly has done that. Caleb has now celebrated his 50th birthday, I am sorry to say, which makes me very old. But he is still practicing the skills of optimism as well.
And to add to that, I always say, don't be afraid to say yes to life. That is optimism, saying yes to life. And we know the work of Carol Dweck talking about effort. Often we forget to tell children life requires effort for all of us. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, it certainly does.
Mhm.
Could I share another couple of stories? Kelly, if you go back to some pictures here, I will share. These are all pieces and parts of my family. So let's go to the next picture. This is my niece. This is Brandy when she was 17 years old. She'd called me up on the telephone and she'd said to me, oh, Aunt Bill, I'm in a terrible state. I said, really, what's wrong? She said, I just flunked a test. I got a D plus. She said, you know what this means? And I said, well, I'm not sure. What does this mean? And she said, this means that I'm never going to graduate from high school. This means I'm never going to go to college. This means I'm never going to get married. This means I'm never going to have any children. And this means that I'll never be what I want to be more than anything in the whole world, and that's a grandmother. And I said, hold it, wait a minute. What are you talking about? And she said, well, if you fail and you don't graduate, then that your whole life is ruined. So we went back, kids are so good at aggrandizing their issues in their lives. So I went back and I said, well, let's look at this grade. Are all of your grades the D plus? Well, no. Well, is it only this one subject area? Yes. Well, do you think maybe we could do something about this? Let's go back and analyze your data before you took the test. Did you put in as much time as you should have? Well, probably not. I really didn't. I crammed just the night before. Well, is there anything else that you could do, Brandy? Well, she said, I probably could go to the teacher and ask her for some special help. I said, that's a good idea. And now about some study buddies. Maybe you could find a study buddy. Anyway, I want you to know that she did go on to be a graduate. She ended up passing this class. She is now the grandmother of 5. So she managed to accomplish that goal. And again, I think that all came to be a matter of optimism. She also needed to deal with it because when she was 28, 10 years after this picture has been taken, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Oh, now somebody's going to say to me, and have many times, and perhaps all of you are thinking, oh, wait a second, Anabel, that's not a temporary issue. And you know what? It's not a temporary issue. This is her daughter, and we're going to get there in just a minute, Kelly, but we're not quite there. But what happened with Brandy is that she remembered the effort part. And so even though she was in a wheelchair, she still became the room mother. Even though she was in a wheelchair, she still made the Thanksgiving pies. Even though she was in a wheelchair, she continued to be a wife and a mother to her 3 girls. So it is all about that effort part. As Susan said, we cannot stress this enough. So optimism, optimism, optimism. You can see that I wanted to use it with my family and practice it. So the next picture, Kelly, if you want to go to it, is actually one of Brandy's daughters. This is the middle daughter. Her name is Ellie. And at 17, she was cutting. So they called me up on the phone and they said, so we're sending Ellie to you, Anabel, you fix her. I said, what are you talking about? Well, you're the psychologist, so you take care of this problem. So off Ellie came. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm 75. What am I doing with having a teenager in my life? I don't even know how to talk to her or what to say or what's our conversation going to be. Anyway, Ellie showed up. I said to her, okay, here are the rules. You need to work, you need to go to school. And so she said, okay, I can do that. And then I just took her with me everywhere. If I was speaking at a funeral, if I was speaking at the school, if I was giving a presentation, if I was traveling to Italy to participate in a Massey class, I took Ellie along. And I began to teach her the skills of optimism. I'm happy to report to you at the end of the year, she'd gotten her scholarship to a private school. She was doing amazingly well, and we were all cheering, cheering, cheering. People said to me, well, Anabel, what did you do? And I said, I just loved her. I just loved her unconditionally. But she had been in school for 3 months when she was diagnosed with lymphoma cancer. And so she again began to practice the skills of optimism and to work on the fact that she would do all that the doctor told her. She would put effort first. She would practice good, healthy eating habits. She lost a lot of weight. She would exercise. She would bring humor into her life. She would really concentrate on the positive things. And that's exactly what you did. She did. So if you look in the next picture, you will see that she is announcing that she is cancer-free. And it's now several years later, and she is still, and we are all grateful for it, cancer-free. A couple of years ago, she sent me this picture that I'm showing you in the next slide. So I'd like you to take a look at it and see what you think this picture represents.
Hmm.
We do have a few people in the audience, and so some of them I wish you would participate and say,
Yeah,
what
we'd like to hear from you.
yeah, what do you think this picture says?
Let me see if I can bring them in. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to do this here. I'm going to actually, oh, there you go. There's my friend Hannah. Hi,
Hi,
Hannah. So, I'm going to go back up. And Hannah, by the way, is she's very she really likes the philosophy of synapse school, Anabel.
Ah,
So much so that she's got her she's in the current year of application for her son at synapse.
oh my gosh.
So yeah, so she and I come from the McCullough School, where that's how we met as parents. And some of the things you talk about optimism is the things that Hannah and I have been on this journey on as well as parents of moms. But let me go ahead and share that screen again. And if anybody now wants to see it, oh, where did it go? It did.
Well,
Oh
that's
my
a beautiful
gosh.
picture.
Okay, wait, hold on. I'll find it. There we go. So anybody in the group would like to just share and comment on this beautiful photo drawing.
Right, right. It's an original drawing from Ellie, and what do you think it says?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on it.
Thoughts on it? Yes, Kelly, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it seems like someone who's entrapped, kind of buried, but
Mm,
yet the fruit of what is in this person's inner core is showing very vividly with the yellow and blue flowers that are coming up through that broken,
right.
hollowed tree trunk. Yeah.
Yeah, dead tree trunk. Yeah.
Mhm.
Jan,
Maybe it's kind of like you're held down, but you have the goal of going towards the flowers.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
Hannah, thoughts?
I think it's kind of interesting that there isn't much of a mouth there. And so I've always wondered
Yep,
if she's also saying, it's not what we say, it's what we do.
what we do.
It's what we do. Uh-huh.
And I love the nakedness, showing vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
total vulnerability. You don't be afraid to be vulnerable. And because I always say when I've seen this, none of us is perfect. Nobody has a perfect life. Nobody has a life without obstacles. So, but yet we can grow. And, the dead trunk, look at the flowers are there. The flowers are there. Yeah. Terry, with Terry who goes and comes. Terry, want to add anything? Okay.
And then Hannah, did you want to say something?
Hannah,
Put you on the spot? No, I think she might be, I don't know
muted.
if she's
Muted.
muted.
No,
Sorry, I
okay.
kind of came in the middle of I had to step out and come in. But I mean, maybe that there's, kind of hard things and life. There's a connection there. There's like a relationship between, good things and hard things.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that
Thanks.
contrast.
Okay. Terry, my next slide, could you show the third slide so we can go on? Yeah,
Sure. Okay, so is it this one right here?
the next. And
That one?
again, this is, we need to have a sense of purpose. A purpose is an ultimate concern, and it is the final answer to the question, why? Why am I doing this? Why does it matter to me? Why is it important? A purpose is a deeper reason for the immediate goals and motives that drive most daily behavior. If you don't have a purpose and you don't know what matters, it is easy for us to feel that sense of failure and pessimism. You know, as we see the picture, here's a picture with Annabelle's niece under the tree. You can see trapped. What do you see? What is she telling us about that picture? You know, what is the purpose of the picture? And again, it's to help young people and ourselves to understand what is our purpose. Because without having a purpose, without having an ultimate goal, then we all become pessimists. We're trapped. Though we are looking, you know, you can see, is she trapped under the tree? Or is there growth? Did she lose her voice? Will she get out? So there are lots of questions she's asking herself, thinking of what she has gone through. You know, I go back to Anabel when she got that letter, which she was afraid to open. She was scared to death, you know. And what is the ultimate concern? What is the question? What is it I'm afraid of? A purpose is a deeper reason for the immediate goals and motives that drive most daily behavior. So if we don't have a purpose, our daily behavior has no meaning.
So I have one more story I'd love to share, and then perhaps a personal reflection after that. So if you go back to my slide deck, and I think it's the next slide. This is what I think optimism really looks like. It's not about having an artificial attitude. It's not about pretending that everything is all fine. You know, Voltaire said that optimism was really just madness and that people were just pretending that things were okay. Well, I think it's not about pretending. And so here's a cactus with all those wonderful little spikes on it. But optimism is about putting a little piece of cork on the end of each one of those spikes so that it doesn't interfere with our life. So Hannah, who said she had been to Synapse, I have a story about a Synapse student. So if you go to the next slide, Kelly, you will see. So this is Mark. So when I was the director at Synapse for 3 years, this was a student who showed up in our first year, and we were just getting started. Our school wasn't even all that big. We had maybe 25 students, something
Right.
at a particular point in time. And Susan will remember this story. So Mark came because he had been pushed out of another school because he had been talking about suicide. And they didn't want him to be committing suicide on their watch. So they said, "I'm sorry, you can't come to school here anymore." So the parents came to Synapse and they were pretty desperate. But they were also pretty upfront. So they said, "We don't feel like we can do this alone. We feel like we really need some help." And so we said, "Okay, we will take Mark on." So we did. So one of the very first things that we did was we gave him the SEI. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see the pre and post tests here. So the SEI YV is a social and an emotional assessment of where a child is in terms of the 6 seconds competencies. And so we have 8 competencies. We have 3 different sections: know yourself, choose yourself, give yourself. You can see how he was doing. And if you look at the optimism one, he was not doing so well in the very beginning when we took the slide. And he also didn't know himself very well. You can see up there he's recognizing pattern score is pretty low. And so we said to ourselves, okay, we're going to start, we're going to work on these 2 things. We want him to discover who he is, and we want to work on the optimism. So in almost every assignment that we gave him, we would find a way to slide in. Okay, what have you discovered about yourself? What do you know about yourself? What are your triggers? How do you congratulate yourself? How do you tell yourself you're doing a good job? And we begin to slide those lessons of optimism in. He was a fanatic about World War II. And so there were many ways we could slide optimism into talking about World War II. And so we did that. And then you can see we gave him a post test and what happened. This was at the time that he graduated. He was an 8th grader. And we retested him to see how things had been going. And And we were happy to see that that each one of his competencies had grown in some interesting way. Hooray, 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 hooray. But that wasn't the most important part. It wasn't just about the assessment. It was what we began to hear from his parents. Oh my gosh, we think we have our son back. He's telling jokes at the dinner table. Oh my gosh, I think we have our son back. He shared that he's developing friends at school. Oh my gosh, our son is actually excited about going off to high school, and he's been writing and working on his self-reflection. Oh my gosh, our son has been accepted into several high schools. Yay, yay, yay. And the story went on and on. And Mark is now a successful college graduate. He took on leadership roles both in his high school and in his college, and he's doing an amazing job. And at his 8th grade graduation, what he said, which was reminiscent of my son, the most important thing that he had learned at Synapse was the skills of optimism, and that he would continue to practice them. And I'm happy to share that his mother shares that that's still happening in his life on a regular basis. So I believe that optimism saves lives. I believe that in a world in which there is so much anguish and there is so much concern, that we need to be teaching these skills on a regular basis to our children, to our grandchildren, to our nieces, to our nephews, so that they will practice them and bring them into their lives and make them a piece and a part of it.
And
Well,
optimism is not pretending that things are not happening to us. As you can see from Mark, I remember this kid, is not that we all have down times in our life, but sometimes we forget the up times because we focus on the down times. We tell children that failures, and I always, mistakes are failures. In my own children, we never talked about mistakes. We talked about oops.
I love that. Oops. Yeah.
Oops.
Oops is much easier to deal with than a failure.
Oops is much easier to deal with. And even now, as adults, they'll call me and say, Mom, something happened and let's talk about it. And I say, what is it? I had an oops. And I say, how big? And sometimes they say, oh, it's a big oops. And humor, at least you can laugh and then we talk about it. Because, and helping people apply in choosing yourself, I look at this, apply consequential thinking. What the consequence of our behavior? Learn how to navigate our emotions, not to pretend that you are not sad, not to pretend, but to own the sadness. As we say in 6 seconds, emotions are messages. They're telling us something. Look at our engaging intrinsic motivation, and only then can you exercise optimism. Can I have my next slide?
Sure.
You were about to say something when I said it.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think Anabel's story of Mark just sold Hannah for Synapse.
Well, let us be clear, Anabel and Susan isn't there anymore.
I know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
So, but just that whole kind of essence of it. And I believe that still is embedded in the hallmark of Synapse today. So
Yep.
is
and
that
they're still
pretty-
practicing emotional intelligence, I'm happy to say, and there are still a few individuals left over from when I was there that are carrying on the mission and the vision.
And the mission. Okay.
That's great.
One of the things when I work with young people or even grown-ups, what is a purpose? A purpose is an end in itself. And we can change purposes or we can add new ones over the years. My purpose when I was 20 is not my purpose now when I'm an old lady. So we can add new ones over the years. But it is in the nature of purposes to endure at least long enough that we make a serious commitment towards that aim before the aim is achieved. A purpose can organize an entire life, imparting not only meaning, but also to inspire us and motivate us for ongoing learning and achievement. So I always say to young people, life is continuous learning. We never stop learning. Yeah. Terry Jacobs is here. Hey, my love.
Hi, sorry.
Hello. Hi, Terry.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
No problem. We're delighted to have
Terry, I'm
you.
going to put you in here. Here you go.
We'll
So glad
send you
it's
to
being
detention.
recorded. So glad it's being.
Janet, are you okay if I put you next to Terry, and I'll put myself back in the middle? So, okay, I'm going to go back to the share mode. So back over to share. I just realized that that is something that and where do I go here? Okay, there you go. So yeah, this is great information, I have to say. And I can see it metacognitively in my own life and where I'm at now, as Susan can well attest. This is something that I reflect on a lot in terms of what am I doing here, or what is the purpose that drives me to the role that I'm serving right now at the university. So I really appreciate this timely message.
Well, Kelly, I had something just happen yesterday. I've been gone for a week and a half visiting family in Arizona. We had a wedding. One of those nieces, the last one, got married. But when I came home, on my coffee table was this gigantic double orchid. Oh my gosh, there must be 30 blooms on it. It was amazing. And several chocolate bars. And I thought, why? What happened? And so I open up the letter, and it is a note from Katie. And this is an individual that you know who taught at
Yes.
Susan.
Oh, I love Katie.
Yes. So she had written me this note just to say, Anabel, I just want you to know I came by to see you. You weren't here, so I'm leaving this little tribute to you. I want you to know how important learning about optimism has been in my life. And I thought, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I think sometimes we don't even realize the power of optimism, but it is immensely powerful. Immensely powerful. And so if we can teach it to our children, if we can provide role models for them, if we can encourage them to read the books and materials of Marty Seligman, if we can point out people in our lives who are practicing optimism, if we can find those role models in celebrities, if we can find them in our schools, if we can find them in our communities and help our children to see them, then this is so helpful to them because they need to be able to find examples.
And for instance, I always, when and Terry and Janet, those of us who worked in Palo Alto, going to college is a goal. Children, I want to get into Harvard, I want to get into Stanford, that's a goal, but it's not a purpose. Why do you want to do this? Because a purpose is different than a goal. Why do you want to go to these places? And often we don't explain to children the difference between a purpose and a goal. I want to drive, my goal is to drive to NDNU. That's the goal. I arrive. Now, what the heck am I doing there? So I always explain, what am I doing there? What is the purpose of being there? So I always try to explain to people, young people, and even to adults, the difference between a goal and a purpose. Yeah. Talk back, people.
That's very well said. And you
Well,
know what? Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
Well, circling back, so this is being a little vulnerable here, but circling back, it's actually about this time last year. If you remember, Susan, we were looking and talking to, various departments in our university, after the announcement of Carol, retiring from her position, and they were looking for a new dean. And it's this distinction between purpose and goal
Mm-hmm.
is very well ingrained at that moment last year,
Mm-hmm.
because I think, there were other folks that tapped me and says, hey, what do you think about you taking on the role? So hence the goal. And it took a while for me to realize what would be my purpose to
Mm-hmm.
have that goal, because I have been hesitant to do anything beyond with where I'm at up to that point. I mean, Anabel could attest, my goal was to become tenured. And when I did, like, you know, but then it goes beyond that. Why the purpose of doing that? Why the
What is the
purpose of
purpose? Mm-hmm.
right? And it came to me in that April, during that time that we were talking to different people and consulting with folks. I mean, Terry, I know you and I were in just one of those wonderful lunch meetings. Hannah back down in Cupertino knew I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And I think during all that consultation and being engaged in community, I realized my purpose to go forth in this was bigger than myself. It
Yep.
was really to help the university in a path where people can also take that optimism moving forward with all the changes that were happening. And as Susan know, I mean, most people in this call know it was kind of a gloomy time, in the last couple of years because of all the uncertainty. And it was taking all this information, like, okay, how can we inspire others in that looking towards the future with optimism? So thank you.
Mhm. So again, always the purpose is bigger than ourselves. So this is why I always say, people like want to go to Harvard. Yeah, so you get to Harvard. So now what? This is why often, young people, they're there and they say, so now what? Because they don't have a purpose. I've reached my goal and I don't know what to do. So we have to be really clear. In terms of optimism, there has to be a purpose. And a purpose, as you said, Kelly, is bigger than ourselves. A purpose
And
is bigger than ourselves. Yeah.
And I even told this just recently, well, to our provost, I says, you know what? I see now a really great mission. Even after I'm gone, if I'm not retiring or resigning anytime soon,
Let's
but
hope
that
not.
to train the next generation
Yep.
of leaders coming up in our university and to mentor them and to say, these are the possibilities. Come alongside, because that means it's not a Kelly show, it's about our community and how we can continue to move forward, the very essence of what teachers do too. So
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Let's look at the next slide. And Annabelle, yeah. I always, when I talk of, in 6 seconds, when I talk of purpose, I always talk about a noble goal or purpose. It drives the person to make a positive difference in the world. And this is what Kelly, Terry, Janet, all of us now are trying to do. What is the difference we're going to make in the world? Why are we working in India? Why do we want to work in China? Why are these? It's bigger than ourselves. We want to make a positive difference in the world. And you cannot do that if you're not optimistic. It's easy to go and say, oh my God, the world is going to hell in a handbasket and sit in a corner and cry. I always tell this to people, that's much easier. What does it matter for happiness? What does matter for happiness is engaging in something that the person finds absorbing, challenging, compelling, especially when it makes a valued contribution beyond the self. When I go to India, I hate that flight. So damn long. but I know why I'm going. Seeing the world through an optimistic lens, especially now we are in our country, it's easy for us to all roll over and start to cry and give up. We cannot do that. Considering failure as a learning opportunity, and that is the work of Carol Dweck. Failure is a learning opportunity. One of the books I gave my children when they were growing up, The 100 Mistakes That Changed the World. The 100 Mistakes That Changed the World. It used to be a little book and I was trying to find it. You know, for instance, penicillin was a big mistake. So again, so failure is a learning, what we call failure is a learning opportunity. To be confident that good outcomes can follow from temporary setbacks. All the things that happen to us, that's why Anabel shared her thing, these are temporary setbacks. This kind of healthy outlook on life is not only, it only produces a sense of well-being, but also sets the condition for personal success. So we have to have a healthy outlook on things will happen. And I tell this to people, young people, I tell this to people, things are going to happen to all of us. And all of us, I have truckload of failures and truckload of pain. We all have them, but it's not to stay there. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Terry. Terry put it, the 100 mistakes that change history.
I like that. And here's a mistake. I don't, well, you probably can't tell it, but it is Post-it notes.
Post-it notes.
Were a mistake. And what would we do without them?
Yeah.
They use them
it's one of my favorite. Post-it notes and the 100 mistakes that change history. And don't be afraid of mistakes. You know, it is a learning opportunity. And I always say, what did I learn from this? Especially the things that gave us the most pain. And Anabel and I have talked about some of the things that have given us most pain. And how did we come out of it? And this is why when we asked to do this, I wanted to do this with Anabel. You know, what are the things that gave us the most pain? And how did we rise from it? What did we do? You know.
So I had not necessarily planned on sharing this, but being you brought this up and you're talking about pain and you're talking about old age, Susan, I will share it. So about 6 months ago, I had a serious situation. I've been dealing with aortic stenosis, which is a hardening of the major valve in the heart. And as it gets harder and harder, then your heart has a very hard time beating. So I passed out at work one day and they sent me off to the emergency room and they said, okay, Anabel, there's no more time. You have to do something about this or you won't be with us much longer. Well, I said, well, how much time? I said, I think the average year after it gets to the acute level is something like 2 years. And they said, oh no, we need to do this next week. Week, I'm saying.
I remember, and I said, and then I took it personally. I said, are you trying to give me a heart attack?
So I said, oh, okay. So what they end up doing, folks, which is much better than open heart surgery, is they cut your femoral artery and they insert what looks like a little silver bullet and they run it up the side of your body through your femoral artery until it hits the heart. And then they find the right place. They push a little button and it flowers out into a valve that opens and closes and opens and closes and opens and closes and opens and closes. This is actually a perfect example of optimism because guess what? The situation was temporary and it was isolated. It only had to do with just my heart. And guess what? It all had to do with the effort. Now, just not my effort, but also my doctor's efforts and my nurse's efforts and et cetera. So it's now 6 months later, exactly 6 months later, and my heart valve is doing great. My heart valve is doing great. And so it was an example of practicing optimism that even when you're 85, it is not too late to practice optimism. It is not too late to bring it into your lives. On the other hand, folks, I have something that I can't get rid of, and I have arthritis in my hands. and I have neuropathy in my hands, and I have carpal tunnel, and guess what? They can't do anything about it. Yes, they can give me a cortisone shot occasionally, and that helps a little bit, but again, it is a permanent thing that I can't get rid of. Now, I could either just sit in my rocking chair and watch TV all day, or I could say to myself, okay, Anabel, you have been preaching optimism for all of your life. You believe in it, you believe in the power in it, of it, and what it can do for you in terms of your life and the lives of others. So this is the time for you to be practicing it. So I get up every day and I put in the effort to be able to use my hands. I do physical therapy at least probably twice a day, about 30 minutes in the morning and about an hour at night, in which I have this whole series of exercises. And I have to do them every day because if I don't, then my fingers don't move. And now I'm working on my legs so that my legs will have more potency and help me to get out of a chair because I can't use my hands anymore to do that. So what I've really learned, folks, is that it doesn't matter if we're a baby or 1 year old, we may need the lessons of optimism. If we're a teenager and we're struggling with school, if we're a college student and we're having trouble making friends, if we're a mother and we're just driven out of our senses with the challenges of 5 children, this is all related to me and my family. If we're celebrating our 50th birthday or our 85th birthday, optimism is a critical skill that we need to be practicing every single solitary day. And it is probably most important that we're demonstrating it to others, that we're demonstrating it to our friends, that we're demonstrating it to our children, that we're demonstrating it to the neighbor next door, and that perhaps we're even demonstrating it to the people in the line at the grocery store. You always have an opportunity to tell a story and to turn it into a lesson. And so I will continue. I promise you, folks, I will continue to do this, even though it hurts. I will continue to do my therapy so that I can continue to go out into the world and share my story.
I will give an example as Annabelle and I were preparing this. And I said, okay, I will do the PowerPoint and you will do the pictures. And I said, how, because I know her hands. And I said, how are you going to do it? She says, oh, Caleb. I said, where is Caleb? She said, in Los Angeles. I thought Caleb was in with her. She says, no, Caleb is in Los Angeles at his home. So again, I said, oops. But again, is to have that spirit and not let your condition in life drive you. So again, we can continue. Let's see the next slide.
Sure.
So I did the writing and she did the picture.
Resiliency, right?
Resiliency. And that is Bonnie Bernard has done a whole lot of research on resiliency. Children, and the story of Caleb, children who respond resiliently to difficult circumstances have 4 key characteristics. And I know Caleb, and you know, and Annabelle didn't say it, you know, the little chunky little baby and the chunky boy now is one hell of a handsome young man. You know, a sense of purpose extended beyond the present to a future purpose. We have to help them to see beyond the present, because often what is happening to us, it can be so overwhelming that we forget the future. Or teach them autonomy, teach them social competence. And this is what Annabelle and I did yesterday. I said, okay, I will do the writing, you will do the pictures. Problem-solving skills. These are the 4 things we have, the research shows. Purpose endows a person with joy in good times and resiliency in hard times. And this holds true throughout our life. So in good times, we can be joyous. When things are bad, we need to learn to be resilient. And it's not only when we're children, but throughout our lives. Yeah.
And the importance of research is so critical. When I was the executive director at Nueva, people used to say to me, that's what it's going to say on your tombstone, Anabel. Research says, research says.
Yes.
Let me share a few things about what research says about optimism. So folks, no matter what almost trait you want to talk about, no matter whether you want to talk about health, no matter if you want to talk about mental health or physical health, almost every single solitary individual who practices optimism will come out better than the person who does not. So optimists are better problem solvers. Optimists are better action takers. They get in and become incisive initiators. Optimists have better heart health, something like they have 35% less heart attacks. Optimists live longer, 10 to 15% longer than the person who is not practicing optimist. Optimists even make more money, folks. So almost any characteristic that you want to talk about, optimists do better than do pessimists. Optimists have more friends, and that is crucial when you reach the age of Susan and myself.
Anabel.
We need our friends.
We need our friends.
We need our friends because they're helpful. They keep us alive. They bring interest into our lives. They bring humor into our lives. So every quality that you might think you want to have, if you start practicing optimism, it will help you to develop that. There's some interesting research by Blackburn and Appel about telomeres. And telomeres are those things that guarantee that you're going to live longer. And so optimists have longer telomeres. So they got a Nobel Prize for proving this. Okay, folks. So I think it is an important thing that we continue to practice optimism and encourage it in all of the individuals that we are meeting with on a regular basis.
Mm. Wow, I really like that. Well, very well said, especially in times like these,
Especially
resilient.
now, we need it more than ever because, often right now, it's easy for us to just give up. And what I say to everybody, we cannot give up. We have to be strong.
We do, and we have to work. My mother, who lived to be 93, she thought the solution to everything was hard work.
She and my mother.
Just work a little harder. But I actually found this quote, which I love. This is from Harry Golden. I don't know how many of you would know Harry Golden, but he was a writer. He created a newspaper that was devoted to promoting civil rights. And so, he's been dead several years, but he said, the only thing that overcomes hard work is hard work. And I really do love that. You can't beat the effort that you need to put in order to make something happen. Hard work is a solution to probably most of our problems.
Yep. And to be resilient. And this is why, the work of Bonnie, there's a whole lot of work. I took the 4 stuff from her on how to be resilient under difficult circumstances. Yeah. Next.
Yeah, Nelson Mandela also said, I love this also as well, Susan.
Yeah.
I never lose. Either I win or I learn.
Yes.
Oh, the importance of learning.
Yeah. And I will share this, especially those of us who deal with our children. Adolescents and emerging adulthood are particularly affected, and this is why Anabel showed her niece. However, by the presence of purpose and purposeful youth, not only avoid the risk of self-destructive behavior. This is what Anabel did this is why I brought this with her niece. How do you get her is not a stupid speech, but Anabel took her everywhere with her. But they also show a markedly positive attitude that triggers an eagerness to learn about the world. Purpose leads to personal satisfaction by bringing people outside themselves and into an engrossing set of activities. When presently with my broken leg, teaching in India gives me purpose, or else I can sit and worry about my broken leg. People with purpose stop thinking about themselves, becoming fascinated instead by the work or problem at hand. So, next.
Sure.
And young people do best when they're challenged to strive, to achieve, to serve. And for what purpose and why? And what do I hope to accomplish with all my efforts, with all the striving that I am expected to do? And some people, I do this for more money. And I say, will money make you happy? I doubt it. What are the higher goals that give these efforts meaning? These are the questions you have to ask yourself. What matters to me? And why should it matter? What is my ultimate concern in life? And I go back to my noble goal. My ultimate concern in life, that is, we learn to care, to be kind, and to be helpful to others. And we can do this anywhere at any time. Yeah.
Is that the last slide? Oh, no, there's more. Okay. Did you want me to turn to the next slide?
Yes.
Susan? Okay, sure. I'll do. There we go.
And again, direction and meaning of a young person's effort. We have to give them the relevant indicators. Just don't only tell them platitudes. Often as adults, we have a lot of platitudes. You know, I said, you know, when people say platitude, give me platitude, I say, what the hell does that mean? Is the young person moving toward a worthwhile goal? How do we help them? And the goal is not a goal, but is it worthwhile? Has the young person found fulfilling purposes to motivate and direct his or her efforts? Are the young person's purposes understood and valued by the community of people that the person needs for support while growing up? How do we help them find that? How do we help them find that? And that is where the optimism comes from, is how do we help them? And if we don't have it, as Anabel said, ourselves, we cannot teach it. And I know Terry, the people I know in this group, I know Terry, Anabel, and Janet very well, and myself. And all of us have tons of things that have happened in our lives. That we can roll over and play dead. But we haven't. We haven't. We keep going. And that is what we have to teach young people. What is the engine? What is driving you to keep going despite all the things that happen in your life? And Anabel and I laughed with that yesterday when I told her, do you want me to do the PowerPoint? I said, Susan, forgot my fingers. I said, oh shit, sorry.
And sorry, that ain't gonna be censored either.
You know, I said, sorry. You know, it was not the end of the world. You know, I forgot. I said, okay, I'll do it. And you do this. Okay. And that was the end of the story. We laughed. Yeah. Humor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I would just say that friends are so important. Susan and I have known each other for a very long time. She showed up at one of the very first seminars that I did when I started 6 Seconds. And we've been friends since then. That's quite a long time, Susan.
Just don't tell them how long it's over. Neither should Janet or Terry.
I am grateful for every breakfast we had, every conversation that we've ever had. Kelly, I have one more slide, I think. It's the yellow.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, let me go ahead and go to that right here. Oh, that's empty.
The next one. Oops, one more right after this. Yeah. Okay. So all of you remember, I think, picking dandelions when you were young and blowing them and making wishes. And so I just want to share with you how important I think optimism is. And in doing so, I want to share with you Emily Dickinson's poem about hope. Because ultimately, the power of optimism is to build and flourish and keep us hopeful. And hope is what we need in order to solve the problems of the world. Hope is what we need in order to make our marriages move forward. Hope is what we need when we have a child who's struggling with a dyslexia. Hope is what we need when we're facing cancer. Hope is what we need when there's an emergency surgery going on. Hope is so critical, and I think she says it so beautifully. There's actually 3 verses to this poem, but I'm only going to quote one. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the time without that the words and never stops at all. And never stops at all. If we practice optimism, if we work on those 3 skills of knowing that it's temporary, that it's isolated, and we put effort into it, and that is the most important part. If we continue to put in that effort, that hard work, then we will continue to have hope in our lives. And this is a time in which we need all of the hope that we can possibly manage and create. And the more we work together to create that hope, the bigger the pile of hope becomes. So that is my wish for all of the children in the world, is that we can somehow provide them with that hope, with those skills of optimism, that we teach them, that we model them, that we demonstrate them, that we share them.
Thank you. Okay, folks, questions for us, concerns?
Thank you
was
very much, you guys. Go ahead, Terry.
wonderful. I love that poem. It's just,
Oh, I love Emily Dickinson, and what an interesting person she is, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to start out my seminar with this next um, next semester. It's just amazing. And I missed the beginning, obviously, but I'm so glad you're recording it. But this is, even though I missed part of it, just been wonderful for me. I
Oh,
really
thank you. Thank you.
believe so strongly in it. And the hardest thing for me is I have a brother with Parkinson's and kidney failure, and the glass is always half empty for him. And he doesn't have hope or resilience or optimism. And so I think that's why this is so important, that starting with early childhood, we instill all of these values in our children.
You know, one of the things that I had my students do when I was teaching at Notre Dame was when Ellie was dealing with her cancer, I asked how many of them would be interested in helping with the service project. And so probably half the kids raised their hands. And so I said, okay, I want you to pick a day on the calendar, and I want you to send a joke or a funny video or something really, you know, that's got some humor in it someplace to Ellie on a regular basis. Ellie got so addicted to these, but she would say frequently she was looking for them. She could hardly wait for when would be the moment when that joke would show up, or that line would show up, that was, or that picture would show up, or that whatever it was that she just loved that. So you might think about, is there a way you could send him something that would perk him up each day?
Great idea.
And if I may add something, I know Terry wouldn't say it. And your brother, I always say, this man doesn't know how lucky he is to have you in his life.
He shows his appreciation. He does.
But again, optimism, how many people would have a sister who would take care of him? So again, we have
to worry about him, or even
worry about him and take care of him. Yeah.
Thank you, sister.
Yeah.
So there's a question from Hannah, actually, and I think I know where she's coming from. Thoughts on how to restore hope when one has lost some hope. What would you say to speak to that?
Anabel, you want to start?
Okay, so the question is, what do you do when you've lost hope?
Yeah,
Well, I actually think that the way that you gain it back is by doing something. You can't just sit. You know, it's a little like depression. It's a little like anxiety. The very thing that will help you is the thing you don't want to do. You know, people who are depressed and anxious just want to sit. They just want to be reclusive. They just want to be out of. So it's so important to find a distraction, find some way to get re-involved. It's interesting that pain reduction, and my hands hurt all of the time, folks, is distraction. So when you're looking for some hope, then do the opposite, you know, of whatever is keeping you in. So if the lack of hope is keeping you home, then get yourself out. If the lack of hope is preventing you from reading, then find a book that'll turn you on. If the lack of hope is decreasing your humor, then find a way to increase it. If lack of hope is preventing you from talking to your friends, then find a way to do the opposite.
So it's basically that effort, right? That you were mentioning earlier, Anabel, is having the effort. And could one say, even just to call out and say, hey guys, I'm feeling like I'm, like I call it the Care and Wisdom Committee, your trusted folks that know you and can encourage you alongside with them. Can you call out to them and says, hey, I'm kind of losing some hope. You guys have anything that could do to keep me on that path or something like that?
Right. Share with me a story that recently just inspired you. Share with me a book that you're reading that's inspired you. Share with me a one-liner that's made you feel better about the world.
Mm-hmm. And Hannah, the example I gave first is one of the things I know that gives me, I don't listen to the news. For me, I don't listen to the news because when I listen to the news, it depresses me. So I don't. And I tell my husband, if there's something you think I should know that's happening in the world, you tell me, because he's a news buff. But I don't listen. I know it depresses me. So again, is to be honest with yourself and say, that depresses me. Hannah, I broke my leg, my foot. And now, I'm an ADHD human being. And I told all my friends who say, and Kelly knows that, I'm ADHD. And I said, somebody get me out of the house or else I'll do something bad to myself. It's not, get me out of the house because I cannot drive. And now, I laugh and I have so many people who said, okay, Susan, I'll pick you up. Where do you want to go? I said, okay, shame, be careful of shame. We live in a world that if you say you're depressed or if you say you're sad, people feel shame. No, we all feel depressed sometimes. We all feel sad sometimes. And to be able to say to the people that you trust, when Anabel called and said that she was having all of these things, and I said to her, are you trying to give me a heart attack? I made it about me because I don't want her to die. I said, don't die on me. And then we laughed, again. So who are the people who you care for? And you can tell them the truth. You can be honest with them. You don't have to perform. We live in a world that's performative. People are always performing. And they are the people you don't have to perform to them. Right now, I'm down like hell. Help me out of that down.
Right.
Yeah.
When you're feeling a lack of hope, and the other thing to do is to find those perpetual optimists. I tell people I'm a recovering pessimist. I'm a recovering pessimist. I am not a natural optimist in any way, shape, or form. But my sister is a natural optimist. Life is good. That's her mantra, and that's what she goes by. So I'll call her up and say, so what's making life good today? And she's always got a story that she can tell me.
So she knows how to find joy in the simple
In the
things.
simple things, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are actually at the time,
Yes.
almost at the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and be mindful of everyone's time here and just say thank you, everyone, for participating in this. This is our fourth of 5 live webinar series. We got one more coming up in May. And again, thank you very much for participating.
Thank you
And
for allowing me to share my passion. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Yep.
you're welcome. So everyone have a wonderful, great weekend, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you. Thank
you.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye.